for joining us this evening, and we'll start this meeting with calling this meeting to order. It's Tuesday, October 8th, and that's the regular board meeting. Let's rise to Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Just a quick note, we are running a skeleton crew today because two of our board members are celebrating Yom Kippur, so Yom Tov to those. Item number B is the agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Number C is
Question from the public? Comment from the public? The agendas that you are publishing are bare bones. They don't really meet the requirements set out by law to describe the items within. And so that coupled with your new bare bones report on the agenda, or minutes, there is very little information for the public. I am asking you to fulfill your duties as representatives of the people and make sure that the people are informed of what happens here. That's all.
moving on to item C, which is the consent calendar. We are approving the draft minutes of regular board meeting of September the 10th, as well as bills paid, all in one swoop. I don't think the board members have any questions because we should have consulted the district manager. I also urge the public to do so if you have any questions on the bills paid. It's best answered when they actually have the information in front of them and can answer your questions. Are there any public comments on the consent calendar? Stephen?
Yeah, once again, we're missing detail on the consent calendar. We don't have an idea of the revenues. There has been a revenue stream eliminated from the district, which was not discussed prior to deciding it in April of this year after the attempted rape. And so we really don't know much about the financial condition unless we have a good idea of what the cash flow is. That means inflows as well as outflows. There are details needed in some of these items. I'm going to skip it for now.
Thank you for your opinion, Stephen. May I have a motion to
So
approve?
moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Item number D is the public comment open time for items not on the agenda. I see new faces and I welcome your presence. Thank you for joining us. If you are here to comment on the JPA, hold your comments until item E1, which is that. Other than that, I'm opening the floor to the public comment, and I see Stephen raising his hand. Go ahead, Stephen.
Okay. I'm going to turn around because this is being recorded and I want to talk to the public. I'm here tonight to pursue my rights as a citizen to observe what's going on tonight. We have a police officer in the corner. He's acting professional and what have you. But the reason why he's here is because this board right here is more concerned about conduct in this meeting than they are about the attempted rape that happened not more than 100 yards from here. I think it's an outrage. They're spending money on protection that is not necessary, and they are completely ignoring protection that would be useful, such as video surveillance, enhanced security patrols, that sort of thing.
thank you for your opinion, Stephen. For future reference, the public comment is when you address the board, not the public, so
Well, I was addressing the board as well as the public.
I would appreciate if you turn around and actually face us when you address us. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Thank you. Item number E is the resolution 2019-07 authorizing the Marinwood Community Services District's participation in the joint exercise of powers agreement to participate in and form the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. This is an action item, and the board will hear an introduction. We will then have some technical questions if there are some from the board. We will then open it to public for comment, and later we will proceed with the motions. So would that be the chief or you, Eric?
Well, just to start, and I will certainly turn it over to Chief Gray as well as Chief Neal, who's here as well. I want to just point out that I did receive a correspondence last evening that I did forward onto the board. Also last evening, I do have copies of it here if anybody would like some. They are there and available. I just want to acknowledge that they were sent and received by the board, and the person who sent them received a confirmation that they were shared with all of you, including the two board members who are not present this evening as well. With that said, I think it's probably best served if I turn this over to Chief Gray and allow him to do some more information on the topic as a whole.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Board President Perry, members of the board, and community that's here. I'm also joined by Battalion Chief Neal from the County of Marin Fire Department, and as a follow-up with last month, we're presenting to you some updates to the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, and our action requested is to approve the resolution to join the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, and request that the County of Marin place a parcel tax measure on the March 3rd, 2020 ballot. I think it's notable that we're in the midst of a red flag alert that is encompassing more than 10 counties, and a public safety power shutoff that sometime this morning, later this evening, early this morning, will likely affect over 1 million people, 10,000 of which are in the County of Marin. One of the advances and enhancements to the response from the fires in 2017, the North Bay fires, was pre-positioning of fire apparatus. We're also in the midst of that occurring, and it was approved in Marin. So there are 2 strike teams that are forming up within an hour that will be available within the county, including OES 358 that will be staffed by 3 San Rafael and 1 Marinwood firefighter, along with 9 other engines, in addition to 2 water tenders, and also the availability of additional dispatch personnel for what we expect could be an event. And the purpose of that is to be able to respond quickly with additional resources, which I think is really interesting timing, but it tells you about what we're facing today. Not something individually, but things that are collectively facing Northern California in this case. At the same time, there is a large-scale event going on in Southern California with what they call Santa Ana winds. So we're all in this together. We're continuing to experience the hottest months and days on record, and it's going to take some time to address this. In Marin alone, it's been said that it's taken 135 years to create the vegetation that we have that has been absence of fire that occurred naturally, to burn that vegetation and allow it to restore itself, along with increased population and suppression activities. It's definitely a long-term investment that I believe strongly we need to address here collectively. The 3 primary goals of the JPA are to get people out alive, protect their home from being destroyed by fire, and create a resilient landscape that will reduce a fire's intensity. 14 years ago, Marin started out on a path of creating a fire plan, and subsequently 3 supporting documents were created community wildfire protection plan that we discussed last month, the lessons learned report from the North Bay fires, and then the most recent grand jury report in 2019 that actually called for the creation of a JPA where all the agencies could work together on prevention. We do a fantastic job of responding reactively on an emergency basis, but where we really need to do work is before the fire that's occurred. So over the last year, the fire chiefs and city and town managers have worked to develop the JPA, and they've included over 40 public meetings to gather feedback and input from councils, boards, and various stakeholders. It should be noted right up front, you know, this is a collaborative effort and there are compromises. So, you know, not all parties are getting what they receive, but we're confident that it will address the need that is so important. The JPA is being presented to you, we believe, is thoughtful, legally sound, and again, collaboratively developed. I want to cover just some of the changes that have resulted from public input. And Chief Neal is going to walk us through the PowerPoint presentation that we have. We're going to use the handout. But representation from all member agencies and governance and operations levels, which means there are 19 separate agencies. All will be represented both on a governance board and an operational level. There's going to be strong citizen oversight with the requirement for an annual public report, not only on finances, which is typically done, but on work plans. What have you set out to accomplish and what have you actually accomplished? And then we'll return to source funding within geographical areas. So 80% over a 5-year period. And I included a map in the report provided to the board that shows the outline of the 5 areas. But I think, as you know, they mirror our paramedic service area, which includes Marinwood, CSA 13, CSA 19, and the city of San Rafael. That encompasses our overall area, and for the most part, what this return to source funding will guarantee that 80% of all of the revenue derived in that area will be returned directly. And the benefit here is that that's going to occur in each one of the areas. So regardless of jurisdictional boundaries, we're going to see results, and I believe they'll be significant. The length of the measure has been talked about by several of the, not only the agencies, but also stakeholders. So this is something that is, you know, not a capital improvement. There's a maintenance of effort required here. So unlike a building or a bridge or a roadway, it is not a one-time need, it's ongoing. And the other effect, and we're seeing it again over the next several days, and we saw it over the weekend, is climate change is real and it seems to be increasing at an alarming rate. Some up-to tax language was included, which allows the Board of Supervisors to lower the tax when a maintenance mode is reached. There's 5-year extensive reviews and an opportunity for changes and realignment, and then every 10 years, a public hearing in front of the Board of Supervisors to determine if a repeal or a change should go before the voters. 3 people can place this in front of voters versus a large number of petitions. And sometimes you're seeing some modern language that puts measures in place that until repealed by voters. It takes quite a bit to actually do that. A referendum process and a petition with could be thousands of voters required. This action will take just 3 members of the Board of Supervisors and it will be reviewed every 10 years. Polling examples that were based on solid, significant statistical experience locally and across the state. So there was good data that went into the evaluation. The organization cost was included early in the process and provided valuable information, and most of their recommendations were included and addressed. There was also strong COC with representation from a taxpayer group, annual written report required, and reviewing the work and the financials that went into this. So it also should be understood that while this is a new concept regarding fire prevention, and to me well overdue, there have been successful JPAs operating in Marin probably transparently right around us. Both Marinwood and San Rafael have been participating in a hazardous materials JPA for over 25 years. That allows us to provide response-related services when no one agency can do that alone. So there are technicians that are trained and prepared and a vehicle and all of that. And obviously we're part of a local JPA when it comes to medical services, as are some other ones in the county. Many of you have received correspondence from special interest groups, including COST, and also, as was mentioned by Eric, CWP. There have been a large number of those groups, and they've taken a pretty hard stance on some of the extensive involvement in communication that they feel is important and needed. And I think that we've had to realize one key word to make this successful across essentially 19 agencies, and that's compromise, in order to have this collaborative effort. It's important to understand we're balancing really a singular tax issue while addressing a long-standing community safety need that none of us individually either can or have been able to address on our own. So we believe that the JPA includes an extensive checks and balances, and the survey results that we received from thousands of residents in Marin were very obvious and were unambiguous. Marin voters stated they prefer an ongoing funding source to something that is either 9 or 18 years in duration. The supporting levels vary by over 10 percentage points, which is well outside of the margin of error for the survey. And I think that's the only single concept we're talking about in this 10-year sunset. This is well beyond the 10-year plan that's going to take us. It took more than 135 years to get us into this predicament. It's going to take us more than 10 to resolve it. And I would hope that a single issue has been as represented, and CWP and others are talking with all the boards. All of them are receiving the same letters, that we don't allow this to hold up the progress I think that we've made. With the current investment that all of us have in both our lives and our property and the watershed here, it's important to protect it, and I think this effort that's coordinated amongst all agencies is certainly our best opportunity to do that. It should also be noted that many homeowners are being impacted by something we're receiving calls on almost daily, and that's of the loss of their insurance. And we're talking about fire insurance, with either non-renewals or just outright cancellations in the midst of an insurance period. Now, it's something we're working closely with individual residents on, but this effort is just another example that I think, in strength in numbers, that's going to fortify our ability to really address that. Because what we can do here is obviously very limited. But I think that force multiplier effect of everyone working together consistently towards this effort will have significant outcomes. Chief Neal, why don't we walk through the PowerPoint?
Okay. So everyone has a copy of it? All right, well, thanks, and great introduction of Chief Gray, and as he mentioned, certainly this is kind of a historic vote for all of the agencies in Marin right now with a short window of opportunity. Certainly we know the threat of wildfire is real, and this is an effort to basically make a dent in the problem. And so we'll talk a little bit about what we've received in feedback in over 40-something meetings, and one of those was to your board last month. And so just reviewing a little bit, the fire chiefs and town city managers have been working on this for numerous months, and we have taken that feedback, and I'll talk a little bit about the changes. So The JPA is certainly a countywide coalition of fire agencies, cities, towns, and the county of Marin. Everyone working together under joint powers of authority. As Chief Gray described, there are several good examples of how efficiently JPAs can run, at least under the fire chiefs, with the paramedic authorities, the hazmat authority. So really the JPA's mission is to fund and oversee a program where 60% of the funding would go to a core program of working on wildfire detection and evacuation system improvements, vegetation management, fire hazard reduction, providing funds for grants, public education, and neighborhood wildfire preparedness. So, and then 20% of the funds would go to funding defensible space and home hardening evaluations, money for seniors and those with access and functional needs who cannot perform their own defensible space. And 20% of the funding would come back to deal with local fire prevention issues. So 20% of those funds would come back specifically to your CSD to deal with fire prevention issues that you have here in Marinwood. And that's around $65,000, I believe. And so we know that there are many improvements and studies and traffic planning and such that we need to address our evacuation systems, studies to figure out where we have choke points, where we can utilize things like contraflow to help access and egress for emergency responders. Certainly you have vegetation management issues here around Marinwood, and so fire hazard reduction work is definitely needed, and certainly the opportunity to have grants for those who need assistance is important. So the 20% of the funding that went to defensible space and home hardening, Marinwood could decide to take the funds and implement inspections themselves, or you could have the JPA do that work. So that portion of the program, you have a choice to basically opt in, opt out. So again, since we were here last, we had just been able to get the video up and going. So there's a website that's got the video. There's lots of background documents that Chief Gray spoke about, the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, the Grand Jury Report, the Lessons Learned Report from the North Bay Fire, as well as frequently asked questions, a variety of information. And so as Chief Gray summarized some of the areas where we took the governance or the feedback to the fire chiefs and town managers to revise the JPA was focused on governance, and that's where we went from 11 board of directors to 19. The Citizens Oversight Committee talked about the length of the measure, and so there is a finalized JPA. I believe you have a copy, and there were just some amendments done last week. So we know governance and the Citizens Oversight Group was a big deal, as well as the length of the term. So one of the big things was obviously expanding the board to 19 members, and there would need the approval and requirement of both the majority of that 50% of that board, as also includes a population weighting, so that there would be good balance on the board for voting. There are programmatic reviews, very extensive, every 5-year reviews, where there can be adjustments to the program proportions. It also includes an up to in the parcel tax language, so if it's up to 10 cents per square foot for the living structure, whereas if you didn't need all of those funds, they could adjust down the square footage tax, so it could be less. So that's something that can happen every 5 years. We talked about the Citizens Oversight Committee, 9 members from 5 of the zones. They'd be members of the taxpayer group, an environmental group, fire prevention, nonpartisan civic organizations. They would self-identify to the board and be put together on the COC. And then as Chief Gray mentioned, every 10 years there would be a public hearing that would go in front of the Board of Supervisors if there was a need to change or repeal the parcel tax, that could be done fairly easy, whereas getting a lot of petitions to do that would be difficult. Okay, so the structure is a board of directors of 19 people. I am on the diagram slide here. 19 folks made up of electeds, and there would also be an operations and budget staff that would also be made, the 19 folks from those same zones and agencies. And then a technical advisory committee with, could be as many as 19 people as well. And that's where we see where there would be a lot of work by that group and kind of digging into the weeds of some of the project proposals. They would assist with some of the prioritization of projects by zone. That group would be made up of certainly partnering stakeholders, could be environmental groups, could be land managers, it could be PG&E, other subject matter experts, those who make sense that we would work with on any of these kinds of projects. So a pretty large group, but everyone wanted to be part of it, and that's kind of what they heard from input. And then the map, these are the operational zones. These are exactly the same operational zones in which we operate the paramedic authority. Basically West Marin in the pink. The green up top is Novato. We've got Central Marin, San Rafael, and Southern Marin. Rolling over to the program funding, we talked about the core program where 60% of the funds would go to improvements to wildfire detection and evacuation system improvements, the fire hazard reduction work, that's the on-the-ground work with whether it be hand crews, fire crews, equipment, goats, chipper programs, the whole gamut of options are there. And that's where a lot of our work needs to be done, obviously, in Marin. And then money for grants, funds for public education, likely through Fire Safe Marin to help us with that. And then the defensible space evaluations, 4.2 million there. Marinwood's portion would be about 65,000 of that. Again, you could choose to do the evaluations or have the JPA do that work for you. And then again, $65,000 would be your 20% of that local fund that could be used on fire prevention projects here in your service district. So we'll move into the structure of what the parcel tax looks like. It's up to 10 cents per building square foot of improved residential and commercial units. There's a charge for multi-unit residential complexes that have 3 or more units. That would be $75 per unit. And then some unimproved parcels, certainly up to a quarter acre would be $25 a parcel. And then for the quarter acre to half acre, $100, and then half acre and greater, $150 flat parcel fee. And then exemptions, the standard exemptions for senior low income folks, as well as exemptions for churches and other typical tax exemption items. And then the inflation rate adjustment based on the Bay Area CPI. So let's see, so again, we've talked a little bit about the mandatory fiscal accountability with not only the Citizens Oversight Committee, but those check-ins every 5 years, an extensive look at the financials and where program adjustments could be made if there needed to be some scaling down of the tax or rearrangement. And then certainly reporting of the financials, and there would certainly be a prioritized annual work plan and budget that would be very public. And then this last page is just an example of what the language would say in terms of the ballot language. And you're, I think, limited to 72 words, I believe, so that's been drafted. So then what's happening now, as I close out with the timeline and next steps, this month, we've been going to all the 19 agencies again, or the 18 agencies, and asking them to pass a resolution requesting the Board of Supervisors to place this initiative on the March 2020 ballot. And then November, the Board of Supervisors would consider that request to put it on the ballot. And then March 3rd, 2020 would be the election. So basically, your board's being asked to put this in front of the voters. The democratic and public dialogue will allow voters to make some informed decisions about this JPA. Certainly, as Chief Gray mentioned, our current investments cannot bring our communities in Marin to a safe place where our fire chiefs feel comfortable. That's why they're here, that's why they're doing this, and we are getting a ton of requests. The public is demanding that we do more to protect them, and so this is that. So with that, questions?
And I'll just add one thing, that the County of Marin, Sleepy Hollow Fire District, Muir Beach Community Services District, Stinson Beach Fire District, Inverness Public Utility District, Novato Fire District, Town of Fairfax, and the City of Larkspur, as of last Friday, have all approved the JPA and a resolution to send it to the Board of Supervisors to put it on the March ballot.
As amended.
As amended.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Chiefs, for your presentation. At this point, I will take technical follow-up questions from the board. So, Chiefs, Jeff, would you like to start?
Be happy to. Okay, thank you once again for your presentation. I've certainly, in attending one meeting and then the two presentations that you've given in this room, come to understand the criticality of this program and how badly it's needed in our county. I do have some questions. One of them has to go back to the fact that when this measure goes in front of the voters, it's going to require a 2/3 majority in order to pass. It seems that in this environment, with as many competing tax measures and the history of tax measures, which are already on the books, everything that we can do in order to make this palatable to the voters, we should take a good close look at. In California Code 6510, you're given the opportunity to either put a term limit on this agreement or basically have it open-ended. So I guess my first question is, I'm sure you know that, and what was the thought process about not putting a term limit on it?
So, some of the polling, represented, a 8 and a 19-year term. And the polling results, there was, I believe, almost 10 percentage points difference between an 8, 19, and until repealed by voters. So some of the discussions that the group had, they're really looking at the polling results and the supporting comments, and so they stuck with until repealed by voters. Because the 8 and the 19 didn't have enough to pass the measure when the timeframes were set there.
Okay.
And there was like a 10% increase in the difference.
Okay.
10 percentage points.
I see.
I am so not the greatest person on the polling results, but maybe Chief Gray can add on to that.
That's accurate. It polled much higher, and actually it didn't pass at lower levels. So I think the public and what was taken by the pollster was the only effective way to do this was an ongoing effort and ongoing tax.
I see. Okay. I want to make sure I understand what you said earlier. I think what I read, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that in order to repeal this at some point in time, you would require only 3 board of
Supervisors.
supervisors?
Correct.
Okay.
And
And instead of thousands of signatures to get something put on the ballot?
Correct.
Is that what you're
Correct.
saying? Okay,
Yes.
I see, okay. Again, my point is simply, what can we do to make sure that if this does go on the ballot, that it has a good chance of passing? And I think, honestly, a number of government agencies and even non-governmental agencies who give themselves raises every once in a while or add fees, there is a voter sensitivity to perpetuity and some ongoing governmental or quasi-governmental agency who can tax them. So, okay, let's see. Would it be true that the vast majority of the expenditures in this program are going to be payroll related, i.e. human resource related? Is there going to be an enormous amount of capital or infrastructure expenditures? How does that shake out?
So I believe the administrative cost maximum is 10%. And
Administrative
there
cost.
would be no pensions, there would be the opportunity for the JPA to hire part-time people or contract for services. They could come to
Yes.
San Rafael and go, can you provide an HR person or a financial auditor, and they'll pay for it, but there would
More
be
as a
no.
contractor as opposed to an employee of the
That's
authority?
Correct.
Yeah,
that's correct.
okay, understood. Thank you for clarifying about pensions.
No pensions.
Understood. Okay. The other thing that, about the oversight committee, there were some opinions again about staggering the positions so that they wouldn't all come due at once, or they would be limited in how long they could serve. But that was not considered either?
Oh, the Citizens Oversight Committee, they can build those bylaws, they're not yet built, so
Alright.
that's all open.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's just that
3
there
years,
there
2,
will be
yeah.
one, yeah, there will be a Citizens Oversight Group, and they'll have to come together and work with the board and then come up with their bylaws.
So the board is staggered as of now, according to JPA. Because I remember reading something about staggering and
That was
So,
more of the citizen oversight. That was a
Okay.
recommendation.
okay,
Right.
yeah.
That they would, and they could fulfill that by writing the bylaws.
Right, I understand. Okay, very good. For now, I think I'm finished. I'm gonna regroup.
Okay, sure.
You touched on the salaries already, so that was my big bug. And the fact that it is open-ended, is something that is very, very difficult to swallow, being a homeowner myself in San Rafael and in Marinwood. I just have a 10% going to administrative, is that what I heard? So that's 2 million. That's kind of a lot, isn't it?
well, the work is not, it's not cheap work. So contracting right now is running, for contracting just to reduce vegetation along 1 mile of road in Marin for evacuation route clearance is running about $55,000 a mile. The work's not cheap, and a lot of it would be contracted. As well as, use of equipment, contracting equipment, buying equipment, whatever is needed. I think for the first couple years, we have one heck of a lot of miles of road to clear back the vegetation on our primary and secondary evacuation routes. So we figure a lot of it's gonna be contracted.
Is that part of the program?
That's part of the core program.
60%.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that in addition to the fiduciary responsibility, we need to do this in an efficient and effective manner. So I think it'll be fully transparent. So the better we can reduce costs
Yeah.
and minimize any overhead, that's exactly what we're going to do. And we're interested in results here and in improving the safety to the community.
Right. The 65,000 that's coming back to Marinwood,
or local.
Part of
local-
the- Yeah, the defensible space evaluation, that's what you were talking about?
So there's two parts
Out
to
of
that.
that 4.2 million, our portion gets 65,000.
Yeah, for the local, yeah,
Right.
the money that could come back to Marinwood would be 65,000 approximately.
And that's yeah. And
Two separate things.
Ricochet, yeah, they're two separate things. So defensible space evaluations are going to happen. We're going to have field crews that we'll be able to put in place that we currently do not have
Right.
at all. We'll be able to put those in place, but this 20% factor, or that 65,000 in Marinwood's case, would be discretionary. The money would come directly to us to use for projects that we think are critically important within the district.
Okay.
And I might have been confusing when I was talking about the defensible space part of it.
Giving us an option of being able
Option.
to utilize the JPA's and inspection field teams or hire our own. I can tell you from my experience, and
Right.
several of the agencies have been operating like this, it will be likely far more cost effective and without bringing on any additional employees or liability to utilize the JPA for those services. And a better economy of scale. And it's great what we'll be doing, because we'll be sharing those same employees within the CSAs and San Rafael. So essentially, you're going to have, and again, fires in these circumstances don't know boundaries, so we'll be having the ability to work literally, across the street from each other, and having that same person being able to coordinate the inspection activity versus having one person from one agency
Right.
doing that across the street and one doing the other side of the street, maybe or maybe not.
Right, my only thinking is that 65,000, Marinwood as a district, we aren't spending anywhere near that for fire prevention and things like that, because it's just not.
We don't have it, yeah.
But we also are concerned about the open space. Well, up in the hills, Queenstone especially, that fire road's been groomed the best in 25 years since I've been around.
The new
It's
project,
the best. But there's still piles and piles and piles of fuel up there that is just sitting around, and it's been up there for years. I mean, trees that are down, just cut up into piles, set aside, never been cleared out or burned during the winter like we used to
It's
do
a
years
great
ago.
project, but
It's a great project and we've got a plan for it.
Okay, well, no, I was just wondering because
Yeah.
the 65,000 won't go very far trying to get rid of everything up there.
No, and that's where that force
That's
multiplier.
every year.
That's again, you have that every year, but the additional effort and what's the category of the 60%? That's a category that we're not talking about, but that's where that kind of work is
Yeah,
actually
absolutely,
going to
being
occur
both.
with fire and fuels crews working in that
Yep.
area
Right.
to mobilize that.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you bet.
So a couple of follow-up questions from me. The first one is just to clarify for myself more probably than everybody else. There are three separate buckets. One is the 60%, the biggest one, that will be the bulk of money that will be spent on vegetation management predominantly and other projects. The second bucket will be the 20% of the funding dedicated to defensible space and home hardening evaluations and senior grants, and that's the part where we could opt in or opt out as a district to participate in the JPA. Then there is a third bucket of 20%, which would be dedicated to the local projects. And I'm assuming that would assume our decision-making, our leadership on what it is, but also us contracting out for the execution. And okay, so that I'm super clear now on, thank you. The next one is none of the directors on the board or committee members, etc., would be compensated, would they?
Well, it's not written into the
Not written into
JPA, but
the
other
JPA.
JPAs do pay compensation for, I understand that they do. I believe you guys can discuss that as the board of directors can make that determination when the board comes together and establishes.
So it is up to the JPA's board to determine their compensation?
I think it could be a discussion item. I'm not sure.
Such as a meeting stipend?
Yeah.
Is that basically what you're
Yes.
saying?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Just limited to that.
Well,
Right.
we are
Volunteer.
operating,
yeah.
our
That's a good model.
paychecks are really fat.
We got a 10% raise last year.
There are also other smaller districts
like
in the
that.
same situation, like your beach and,
And
Yeah, just- I just
they
wanna-
function like Marinwood.
yeah.
Right.
So overall, I think that, this is a tremendous opportunity for us to be part of a joint effort that gives us access to tools, equipment, expertise that we would never be able to afford as a district. So I think, many people agree that this is a very necessary effort, and I think that the conversation that happened is actually a good one to have, the taxpayers groups, the other groups to kind of contribute to this hashing out of ideas, because only this way we can ensure as wide of a support for the measure as possible. And I want to applaud you for listening to them and incorporating the feedback and not giving up just yet, but really continue to engage with them and make sure that this compromise, as you said, compromise is never 100% happy for everybody. That's not what compromise is. But if we can really, marry as many people as possible in this happy union, that would, I think, be preferred. For me, what didn't really make sense was the Citizens Oversight Committee, the fact that they would be appointed by the board members.
Not appointed, they would self-identify to the board, so from those zones, so they'll know who wants to participate. And then,
But somebody would have to appoint them. If there are 5 different people who are running from Marinwood, then who would be the deciding?
I would guess that you would get some input from your CSD board as to.
So it would be actually filtered through each agency, and then each agency would appoint one member. But that's the board, that's not the citizens committee.
So, I don't think all the details are laid out, like bylaws of elections or any of that kind of, I think that's all still open, about how, I just know that they're supposed to be self-identified from those zones, of, hey, I wanna be on the citizens oversight group, and if you have 5 or 6 of them, you can only have, one from each zone, or, I'm not sure how exactly they're.
Yeah, it's laid out in section 8 of the agreement.
Right, that's
So,
where I'm actually referring
yeah,
to.
the 5 participants from the 5 general geographical areas, and then participant from a taxpayer organization, an environmental organization, Fire Safe Marin, or similar fire
Right,
prevention.
but it says in the sentence below, the board of directors shall appoint participants to citizens oversight committee.
As set forth below.
From those groups and from the 5 zones.
So the assumption here is that, for example, a taxpayer organization of Marin County will come to an agreement and appoint one person to be participant on
And I
the
think,
GPA.
right, and I think ultimately we were trying to name just one specific, be
Right,
broad
right,
enough
right,
so
right.
that then the Board of Governors could decide who would represent that. And it was likely to probably be rotational as well, so depending on.
Again, I think it should be made clearer to the voters that the Citizens Oversight Committee does not report to the Board of Directors. That
Right,
it is
should
really,
stand alone.
right, it's an oversight
Yeah,
committee.
that's how it's
independent.
shown
It's
in
true.
the, at least in the.
Well, I mean, from the text only, I got the impression that it was the Board of Directors, Citizen Oversight Committee, and other committees. The graphic shows it equal.
I know it's dotted, it's a dotted line.
Right,
Yeah.
but, So I'm just,
Yeah.
right, and the word oversight to me, being English second language, person, implies that someone oversees the board, so therefore the oversight committee is actually more of a higher office, or maybe more independent, thank you.
Independent.
Yeah.
Well, and because they can create subcommittees that actually monitor the board of directors, the governing board and everything associated with that.
So that's, at some point, yeah, that was really my biggest beef with the write-up. And you answered my other question about the sunset clause, because that was also but if the polling research shows that you are actually maximizing the likelihood of success by putting it in perpetuity, who am I to question that?
And then again, the addition of the ability to review it every 10 years and repeal it or modify it as necessary.
I like the idea also that the Board of Supervisors has the right to dissolve the JPA if they decide that it's not,
Assume its purpose.
yeah, but we know that weed grows.
Right? And again, this is only going to be if in fact the voters support this.
Right, right. So again, thank you so much for your tremendous work. Thank you, directors, for your comments. And now we'll open it to public comments. So please raise your hand. Go ahead, please.
Good evening. My name is Janice Rosales. I live in Marinwood, not far from here. And I am a member of the Citizens for Wildfire Preparedness. I am asking Board of Directors to include two elements that are in the public interest in voting tonight. They address the necessary controls on the expenditure of public money. To do this, I'm requesting that you adopt the two amendments that I provided earlier today, so substituting the language in Section 8 and Section 21 of the JPA agreement. We are asking for a Citizens Oversight Committee that has more authority to oversee the activities of the JPA. The COC, as written in the current JPA agreement, has little power to provide effective feedback to the public. They would be reporting back to the Board of Directors rather than directly to the public. Further, to ensure that the oversight is truly independent, the COC should have the power to select its own members so that the possibility of cronyism and patronage is avoided. Additionally, we consider it to be essential that the public has the power to determine whether the new agency is effective by providing a sunset of 10 years on the tax funding measure. Currently, the Board of Supervisors can review after 10 years, but really, do we think that the Board of Supervisors would not want to keep a tax bringing in that kind of money in force? The public needs protection. These changes will make it more likely that the public will approve the measure, especially when there are a number of significant tax measures for them to vote on this next year. I do support, and our committee supports, the formation of the JPA. We've spent many hours as well studying it and studying fire. And I do thank the firemen and police in our county for their service. I know there have been many compromises, and I am coming to you representing the Citizens for Wildfire Preparedness with the comments I've made. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
My name's Robin Garrity. I live in Marinwood, and I have 2 points that I just would like to address. The idea that it needs an end date, well, that's uncomfortable to all of us. Nobody mows the lawn just once, and that's taken care of. The hills are going to grow. It's not going to stop. It's going to take forever to catch up, from what I understand and what I've read. It's not a 4-year or 6-year fix. It's not a 10-year fix. We're here. We've lived here. I've lived here 25 years, so we've lived here a lot longer, and it's not going to change. If the Board of Supervisors, or if you put that limit on it, it won't pass. The polling numbers are real, but it won't pass. And I forgot my other point. Citizens oversight. It's very similar to school bonds and school parcel taxes that are here locally in Dixie School District. And so they are, it's important to have representation. And I think that the efforts that have been put forth, if you've been reading the papers and tracking the progress of this project, they've done a lot to try to make that compromise. Nobody's getting everything they want, at least what I've read. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment.
Yeah, my name's Kevin. I live in Upper Lucas Valley Road on Idlebury, so I'm a homeowner here. And I just wanted to kind of emphasize my support for this. You know, I haven't lost insurance. We haven't had any fires right by the house, luckily. But, you know, we're not very far from Novato. We're not very far from West Marin. We're not very far from Sleepy Hollow. And if the community as a whole is not getting together and removing these fuels and doing this work, you know, the weather, like it's about to change right now evidently, and we're gonna get the wind, the slightest thing, it's gonna come over our hills and come to our valley as well. So I'm very supportive of this countywide effort, and I hope you guys will vote in favor of it. I feel like the Citizens Oversight Committee and the items that have been added to take a look at this measure every few years to make sure it's heading in the right direction, I think those are good backstops. So just wanted to leave my support.
Thank you for your comment. Stephen?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank Chief Gray and Chief Neal. Chief Gray, I have the utmost respect for him as a fire official. However, my comments are going to be focused, well, I want to focus comments on a couple of things. First of all, with regards to lesson learned in Santa Rosa fires, I mailed or emailed everybody an article from the LA Times, and they had a very, they were very critical of all the wildfire clearance as if it, wildland clearance as if it's a panacea. What they learned up in Santa Rosa was those fire breaks did not do what they were supposed to do. But so we need to, I still think we need to clear our lands, but we need to go about it intelligently. The other thing is, how many agencies do we have? 17? We literally have 17 chiefs. 17 chiefs and not too many Indians. I believe we should reject this until we have structural change to our county fire services, and I would think someone of Chief Gray's caliber would be an excellent choice to lead that effort. But that's not what's on the plan here. MIRA, we voted for a tax for MIRA. We voted for a tax for paramedic tax. Unfortunately, the fire service has, they can raise taxes, but the implementation of the plans are sometimes lagging. So I really question the ability to get this done. They presented you a plan where 80% of the dollars we send them will come back here. Well, I've got a counter proposal. 100% of the plan funds get spent locally, that we have a local measure to address some of these concerns. Now, we all know that pensions are a huge issue, and unfortunately it's the public safety employees that are really burdening us, and that's why I say the first thing we need to do is look at the restructuring and deployment of services, as opposed to setting up a new agency which will be a new fiefdom that basically will lock into place the fiefdoms that already exist. The structure of the parcel tax is also questionable. We're concerned about affordable housing, and I would like you to look at this, because actually the renters are really paying the highest rates per unit, and they will pay it through more rent. And the unimproved parcels, it's hardly anything. A half acre or more, it's $150 a parcel. We have, you know, big tracts of land, hundreds of acres. I believe that this is not ready for prime time. It doesn't deserve your support. It's raw, it's unfinished. It's a good idea. We do live in a risky area. That's a consequence of our climate and our geography. We do need to address some of these issues. We should address some of these issues, but let's do it the right way. Let's not set up an agency that has power to create bonds, to create new laws, and basically be out of control of local voters to manage.
Thank you for your opinion, Stephen. We will,
One more question.
sure.
I just want to make sure I understand. If this goes on the ballot March of 2020, the taxes that come in will start to flow in say November of that year. Am I correct that the county may be in a position to pre-fund this so that if it does pass, we can get going on it right away?
That's correct.
It is?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. Having heard from the public, having discussed it here, I would be ready to hear a motion.
I'll move that the Marin Community Services District authorizes our President of the Board of Directors to authorize MCSD participation in the joint exercise of powers agreement to participate in the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority and request the County of Marin place a parcel tax measure on the ballot.
Thank you, Director Naylor. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Do we need to discuss any further? I don't think so.
One other thing. Is there still wiggle room? In other words, if there is there still time for any sort of compromise on this, or is this it?
Well, at this point, what's before us, this is it, but let's just say you've got to be open to the possibilities.
Marinwood is not, we're the tail wagging the dog here. We're not gonna change the language, even though some of what has been proposed, I think, has some merit. And I'm just wondering if other organizations are taking a look at that, and there may be something,
There could
some
be,
minor change.
I think I'm open to the possibilities.
Well, based on the meeting I was in with the CAO and that group is that no. Or changes. We cannot continue to tinker with it because we're halfway through everybody adopting that as amended.
And I think by tonight, we're halfway through, so that's accurate.
And again, a lot of meetings and a lot of feedback. Not everybody got everything they wanted, and the group feels that they have
Okay, well, thank
done
you
as
for,
much as they can.
And I think my point is that this is going to evolve, as will the needs of the programming to ensure, safety countywide. So in a larger sense, I think, we're at a point in time where we need to move forward. We need to, the dialogue is great, but we need action. And that's what the community expects, and that's, as your, fire chief, what we really need to have in place.
yes, understood. Okay, so this is a time critical thing?
Yes.
And we need to,
Put up or shut up.
I think so.
Okay.
I think this is a very critical program and something that we should definitely support, irrespective of all the fine tuning that would come over time.
I still hope that the necessity of the measure passing
Yes.
will keep the doors open to hear public input. Having said that, I think there is nobody in the room that would deny the value of this program to Marinwood, but also to Marin County in general. And I only can hope that this JPA will lead the way, not only for this new program that will focus solely on prevention, but also for the fire departments to find together and form one fire department that would be efficient as it is, but more cost efficient.
Yes.
So I'll just call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And so the motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, chiefs, and thank you, everybody from the public. Please come by more often, and we need your support and interest. Moving on to item E2, which is the potential creation of a district-wide strategic plan. I guess I'll just introduce this subject matter since I was the one who came up with this brilliant idea. I trust everybody has read the memo that I produced, and the idea is basically to give us a sense of direction and goal to strive towards not only reacting to the increasing cost of pensions, but or the OPEB, and I think this was a tremendous effort that really enlightened us. But maybe figure out where we want to be in 10 years. How do we want to look like as a district? The questions for the board today are, should we even engage in a strategic plan at this point? Because that might not be an opportune time for one reason or another that you may see and I cannot, but would be convinced because I'm a reasonable person. The second item would be, if we decide to proceed, should we do it by ourselves or should we leave it to a professional who would probably make it more efficient and productive? And third was, if we are engaging, should it be 5 years, 10 years of a timeline? What should be the subject matter areas, which were example was given below, and what would be some elements of the process. Again, some of my ideas are contained in the memo, but it's all open for discussion, and one way or the other will not be offended. So, Bill, why don't you start?
Okay. I think we are strategically planning currently. We've been doing this for the pensions and the OPEB, and that's the main overriding concerns that we have as a district fiscally. Other than that, you're looking long-term strategically planning. Do we want to keep the park and rec? Do we want to keep the fire department? We know the answer to one, and we're not sure about the other. We know that we want to get rid of the fire department, all encompassing as a district entity. Because gradually, especially now with the JPA moving in the direction that I think it's headed, all the fire departments, it's going to pull those all together too. So I think what's going to be left here is a park and rec, and what's going to be streetlights.
Don't forget about the streetlights.
Yeah, so
Streetlights are critical.
Strategically, I think the writing's kind of on the wall, and if you're thinking 5 years to 10 years, I think that's what we're going to be left with here.
Fair enough. Thank you. I appreciate your comments.
No worries. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for thinking about the future. Like something else we're gonna go through tonight, I also, over the last few years, have been gratified to see that our staff is thinking about the future and doing it in a quantitative manner, to look at capital purchases, capital reserves, et cetera, et cetera. I think that and the obvious analysis we've been doing about our pension liabilities and OPEB are two of the strategic initiatives that we've already gone through and are bearing some fruit. I'm not entirely sure well, first of all, when I think of strategy, and I come from a non-public environment, I come from a private environment, where strategies are predominantly for companies or entities that are in competition with other entities, and they see an enormous amount of external threats and this and that. They need to have a strategy in order to, thrive in that environment. I think we don't have, I think all of our threats are internal. So, so I feel that there are some items here that I think we could discuss, and others I'm not quite sure I understand why. For example, role of the board of directors. I think that should be sort of fairly obvious, but we can certainly have that discussion. And I think that there are some of these items that we can have a discussion right here by ourselves without any sort of, professional advice, because I'm not sure that they're necessarily, there's a strategic path for them, okay? So the other comment I will make is, I'd like to discuss this again when we're a full board and see what the others have to say about it. But at this point in time, I'm unclear of the value of having a strategic plan exercise.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
You mentioned that some of the items you would want to discuss as a board, aside from, if
Sure.
not within the framework of the plan, then separately, if you could maybe send an email to Eric listing these, and
Sure.
we can see if we can put it
Sure,
in the...
I'll be happy to do that.
All right, thank you, that was very efficient. Excellent, let's move on. Oh, sorry. Public comment on item E2.
Yeah. First of all, I want to commend Isabella for presenting the concept of strategic plans and forward thinking. I think it's a great idea. However, I do see a few flaws in what she's presented. First of all, it's among yourselves. Now, in the long term, there'll be movement on the board through retirements or whatever. And so to just do it among yourselves seems to be, well, anti-democratic. There's a concept, and I think Jeff is a New Englander too, but in New England we have the annual town meeting where such strategic plans are discussed, budgets are gone over, and it's a chance for the board to stand in front of their people they represent to explain their ideas. Also, we have something called elections, which is another good way to articulate those ideas. Nevertheless, the fundamental concept that Isabella has presented is well worthwhile. I don't think we need an outside facilitator. You're just missing like one huge participant, and that is the public. And I don't mean just me or whoever shows up, a handful of people, but actually making a concerted effort to get as many people here to discuss the future of the district. We will have lots more changes in the future, and such a dialogue will be very useful for you to guide you during the year. Once a year in the spring prior to adopting the budget. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Stephen. Just a point of clarification, that was by no means, was supposed to be a topic that would be discussed only within the board. That was just to get the ball rolling, get the juices flowing, and all stakeholders would be naturally involved in the plan. But again, it may not necessarily have to be labeled as such for it to somehow be happening already. That's kind of the message I received from my fellow board members. So. Anybody else from the public? No. Okay, so we will move to item E3, which is the capital expenditure forecast and financial reserve planning needs. With that, I'll hand it off to Eric.
Yeah, this is just an informational update. We kind of built a quasi-administrative calendar. We placed this to happen in the fall and in the spring. And obviously it's looked at quite often by staff, especially as we start getting into the budget cycles and looking at refreshing and making sure that, okay, where do we stand? These obviously are best guesses on several of the capital assets at play. Luke and I did sit down and go through the Park and Rec sheet recently. The fire sheet, not quite as recently, but has also been reviewed, and then I re-reviewed it again this past time and sat with the captains during some periods of transition as we were going through the last budget. Bill obviously taking a moment to be able to sit with the chief, but at this point, there's no action on this item. This is more of an informational item, just to share with the board, with the public, that staff uses as a capital investment planning tool, especially as we're looking at what our financial needs are going to be into the future in terms of our larger fixed assets.
And as an aid to setting aside reserves.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we have seen it before, it's not news to us.
No, that's true.
I have a question. Is the pool plastering, is that scheduled?
It's not scheduled.
We're looking at it in this fiscal period.
We are, that was approved by the board, but as Luke, especially Luke and I work with and talking to other people and vendors, we are also getting some other opinions on might not be in quite as bad of shape as your initial opinion got, and we've seen much worse pools running for much longer, and while it certainly would need some patching, some of which we might even be able to do ourselves, it's going to need it in a few years. It might wind up happening this year, but if it isn't absolutely needed, my opinion would be that you wait until it is needed, as that is only going to extend the life of it again that much longer.
Right.
If it's needed now, we do it now, but when people who are coming to us who would make money off of this job and are telling us, I'm not sure that you're in quite a bad shape as you think you are,
It's a good sign.
that raises an eyebrow or two on, interesting, okay. So we're constantly monitoring it, and if it needs to be done, obviously we will do what we need to do to get it into, so it'll be open and ready for next pool season if that needs to happen. We do have several sample RFPs if we do launch that out there.
And then the kitchen cabinets, counters, and flooring, is the flooring part of the overall center?
No.
So that
Only
was
within
just
the
done,
little
though, I
kitchen
know.
world,
Yeah.
so, and that was, that was not a fully approved expenditure for this fiscal year. I had put a placeholder in the budget for it, so that way it was marked in there, and I think I put 54,000 for it, and this was just for, mostly work that we could do as far as installing cabinets and things along those lines, but bringing in people to do flooring, the basic industrial grade laminate type or tile flooring, as well as countertops are the big ones that we would need outside work getting done.
Cool.
Yeah, but those two were pitched as, if we do the pool, I'm not gonna come back and recommend we do the kitchen as well.
But if we can defer the pool, then we could.
Quite possibly, yeah, of course.
I mean, that's one of the
Other
things-
things come up,
Sure.
$50,000 storm drain project that wasn't
Right.
planned for either, so.
That's
yeah.
right. But this tool does lend itself to that kind of thinking, i.e. we've got back feedback from, pool vendors that we're not in jeopardy, we could probably push this out a year or 2 years. What could we achieve that, might be
Right.
a little bit more critical?
Well, and I invite Luke to speak to anything else on the pool. He's been much more in depth on some of those conversations than I have as well, so.
Yeah, no, I think it's, I totally agree with how Eric framed that. As far as other work to be done, one thing that one of the people that came out and looked at our pool did mention is that there is some work to be done around the pool. Would be a much lower expense, but some of the deck work needs to be kind of addressed, and the cracks and things need to be addressed. But and then we can talk more about what's going on in the equipment room as well, kind of the longevity of some of the gear there. But yeah, I don't know if there's a specific question, but
I'm just curious, is there any reason why we still have the Colorado pads in the deck?
the only reason we still have the Colorado pads on the deck is that taking them out would leave holes in the deck that we would then have to fill with
Okay,
something.
but they're not causing any problem in and of themselves.
That's a good question. I'm not sure exactly what the, what's underneath the pad itself and how what the wiring is and all that. I haven't seen a diagram, but yeah, I'd say if we did address some of the cracks and reseal the sealant around the edge of the pool, we would probably look at what it would take to take those out, fill the holes.
Yeah,
as
I
well
was just
as,
curious if
yeah.
that even been looked at. Okay,
Yeah.
no big deal, thank you.
My thought about the flooring in the community center, I know you mentioned that there's only one last refinish left. Next time we are redoing the floor, could we maybe look at another material that would have more longevity?
Absolutely, yeah. So when this floor was done, I think it was about 5 years ago, we had it completely, a brand new floor put in.
Right.
There was some debate about whether that was sanding or, and the logic when that was done was, well, the first version of that lasted us over 30 years. That served us pretty well, did sort of the same thing again. The nature of what's happening in the community center has changed a lot in the near future. So, talking to the company that came in and did the sanding and refinishing of the floor, they gave me a whole list of recommendations and specific places to go check out the floors that they've done, and for the wear and tear on our floor and the activities that are going on, did have recommendations for some different styles. And there's a lot of options, so it's not like you should do this. It's like, oh well, this is this benefit, this is this benefit. Definitely a conversation to have. But we should have, this last sanding, and we'll still be able to put more coats on the floor of the sealant and the finish, but there's not anything left to sand away at this point.
Right.
This should, if we take good care of it, and they gave us some new products to use for cleaning and et cetera, we could get 7 to 10 years out of this current floor, depending on what's going on in there. That wasn't a guarantee. They didn't put that in writing. It may be closer to 5, but that all depends on what we're doing on it.
Okay.
So
yeah. So that's basically that's our best guess as of whenever you look at it last week or whatever, but this is a fluid document, and as the wear and tear happens on our infrastructure, obviously this plan is adjusted and needs addressed on most urgent basis.
exactly.
But that tool is invaluable because we are now actively involved in capital improvement planning and put money aside for such things.
Right.
So, any comments from the public, Stephen?
Yes. Well, first of all, once again, it's good to look forward, and I'm glad that you're looking forward. However, it seems like you're not listening to what the public is asking for. How are we doing for our senior population? We were supposed to have a study, I guess, on pickleball, which I guess it's a complicated study, but it's a few stripes on the pickleball courts. We had asked for park benches, which have not gotten installed. We've asked for restoration. What we have gotten is the removal of the nature trail, and it just seems to me that you can do a lot of good in the community, but you're limited to the amount of good that you have with the 3 people on the board, because you're not actually listening to the public or soliciting information from the public. Measure A has very specific goals in mind, and I don't see any of these things really meeting them. These are just general capital goods, capital purchases. They're not restoring. They're not restoring the environment. They're not creating more recreational opportunities. They're not providing more accessibility. Linda, I'll talk about later tonight. She's asked you for a handrail to come into the community. She's concerned about tripping hazards. This is part of what we should be be concerned with our Measure A funds. So look forward, but don't forget that you have a public that may have different opinions on this. Lastly, I just want to say one thing about the kitchen remodel. I gave you, there was, I think, Granite Expo, that's what it is, in Emeryville. I got a quote for $12,500. You decided to reject that quote. That was including granite countertops. I encourage you, if you're going to refinish over here, to actually get in the car and get a quote from them, because they're very affordable and a lot of builders use them. And if you're not doing that, well, shame on you, because we could use that extra money for additional things around the park.
Thank you, Stephen. That comment will bring us to item E4, which is District Manager's Report. Eric?
Good. A quick update on the storm drain repair project. I'm actually expecting them to start initial work on that tomorrow.
Yay!
Yeah, just heard from them today, actually this afternoon, saying we're ready to move on this. Tomorrow we've got all the approvals that are needed from the county, from the regulatory agencies, and it was a matter of once those came in, getting finalized with the contractor schedule, so he is good to go and get started on it tomorrow. The work itself won't take that long, but then there's a security period. I will send out some announcements via Nextdoor and our Facebook, just letting people know that there'll be work happening in that area, and to please use caution when going through there. That said, don't be fencing off the actual areas where we'll be working down by the creek bed and everything else. So that is moving forward, which is good. The park maintenance facility project, that is still in the county's hands at this point. We have submitted what we believe is complete. We are simply waiting on final review from DPW for completion of all documents that were requested. We actually wound up submitting quite a bit more than ultimately was required at the end of the day by them. And I don't anticipate them taking any less than the 30 days of they're entitled to review for completion. That should be this week, that it was submitted back, I think September 12th or September 11th. But again, as I put in here, to be clear, scope design, nothing has changed in this project from what the board has approved. This is still just a function of a long and drawn out design review process, which will still be ongoing. All they're doing right now is reviewing for that everything we have deemed is complete according to their requests at this point in time. Other items of note, I did send out a social media announcement, and I think I sent some information to the board, but as you can see up and down Miller Creek, they're doing all sorts of work. These are ADA and safety improvements to crosswalks. I will say that based on correspondence that was sent on behalf of the district, we did bring some special attention to the crosswalk that is immediately in front of the community center. I do not know exactly what they're going to do to enhance safety of that, besides some bulb outs and some additional signage, but one of the things I do know that they're looking at are options such as like those little flashing lights that hit the ground when pedestrians are crossing, and I just let them know between our firefighters and myself with the front row view from my office window that we have seen far too many close calls right there, so they are paying special attention to that. We also said, hey, as long as you guys are doing stuff, some additional signage of emergency vehicles coming and going from this area would be great, and feel free to cut down every liquid amber tree up and down the street. They did chop down 2 of them actually so far. And they also let me know that more of that might be happening next year, because they're actually slated to do a resurface complete asphalt job of Miller Creek Road from where they stopped last time. So when that happens, they might very well be chopping down a lot of the sidewalk trees that are impinging into the road and causing things to buckle. And then finally, with LAFCO, they have initiated the process of a meeting next week. That's going to involve their executive officer as well as members from the city of Santa Fe and the county of Marin. This is just a staff level meeting at this point in time regarding fire services and looking at, tell us every single thing that is remotely possible, from do nothing to form a completely separate agency of everybody and everything in between, and then put it on LAFCO and their legal team to tell us what all of the legal steps and requirements. This isn't an opinion, this isn't a, hey, here's what I think we should do. This is, tell us everything we can do, and what are the legal and technical steps needed to achieve all of those. And once all of that fact-finding and research is done, it'll get hiked up the chain to respective governing bodies, including this board, the Council of San Rafael, as well as the Board of Supervisors. And so those are the three jurisdictions that have responsibility for fire protection in this area.
So that's basically a presentation of any and all options possible.
That's the goal.
And
We haven't had our initial meeting, but that is my understanding of what we are trying to accomplish
throwing
with
it
this.
on the wall and seeing what sticks.
Just,
Brainstorming
is it as remotely possible, and what are the legal and technical steps to get it there? That's all it is at this point in time.
And then back to the facility replacement project, the County of Marin will be conducting all notice and communications.
Correct. Yeah, the design review is a county process. They
And that's
will
open
handle-
to the public?
Of course.
Okay.
They'll handle all noticing, all communications, and it is in their hands at this point. The district has done what the district can do and has gone through an extensive process with it. It is a county-led process at this point in time.
I apologize to fellow directors for taking first stab at questions. So, Jeff, would you like to?
I'm just out of curiosity, we had the heavy rains, was that 2 or 3 years ago? And
Last year.
have we heard anything from FEMA in the last 6, 12 months?
Regarding,
Reimbursement?
you're talking about from the 2017 is when
Yeah.
that occurred.
2 years ago.
I have heard, actually not too long ago, but this was a few months ago, the only project that is outstanding within the FEMA world at this point is the work that was completed between Stone Fire Road. Ponte, we pulled out because of all the work that the county is doing, and a couple of the other projects were deemed ineligible, so those ultimately were pulled, and some had work done to them that wasn't compliant with FEMA, and so as a result, those had to be withdrawn as well. But the only one outstanding is Queenstone, and it's about, I think, about a $10,000 outlay at this point in time.
Queenstone is all done.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, all the improvements and everything that can be done has been done at this point in time.
Ponte single track road has been really adjusted.
I don't know if you've been out there lately.
I was up
They
there
are
last
doing,
week.
the county is doing a lot. It's pretty impressive, the size of the crews and the machinery and
Oh,
everything
yeah.
else that they're doing. It's garnering a lot of really positive attention. It's gonna be, when it is said and done, it's gonna be a remarkable project.
Thank you. Comments from the public, Stephen?
Yeah, first of all, I want to point out that Eric didn't provide you with the manager's report in the full packet that I had requested, so I'm going a little blind here.
After the spreadsheets, there should be a next meeting.
Yeah, they're not, so I'm sure you meant it to.
Well, I actually think I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, right there. That's it.
Oh, right you are, it's on that, okay. Actually, I have a question concerning the park maintenance facility. It's represented that everything is complete, however, the story poles are not installed. What is the disposition of the story poles? Will they be installed?
When I can find a vendor to install them.
They will be installed anytime when we need to install it. I don't think we're there yet, correct?
I'm actually have put out informal notices looking for contractors to do the work.
Okay, so from my understanding, with talking with Michelle Levinson at the Marin County Department, that the package is not considered complete until those story poles are installed. We think those story poles are really important you haven't really had a public forum on this. We did have one in the beginning. We discussed 4 possible scenarios. You went with the 5th scenario and hired Bill Hansel. You promised to involve us. You promised to tell us how much it would cost. We haven't had either one of those things. So the public is really blind on this. It's very, it's disturbing that you guys have become more secretive as an agency. And I think you're making a mistake because that project is one of the most expensive, probably the most expensive capital expenditure for the district in many, many years. And so I'd like to see you really do honest outreach. I'm asking you to hold a public forum once those story poles are installed. I'm going to reiterate again, I've actually said this for months at a time, but you actually have a problem with the movement of vehicles is going to be impossible on that site. It's going to require much more space than you think it's going to require, and I can show that to you. I attempted to do that with a model. I can do that again, but you know, 22-foot vehicle and a 21-foot trailer and big piles of landscaping waste, you're not going to be able to do the basic functions of the landscaping department there. So I've called it a white elephant. I believe it's a white elephant, and unfortunately that will be a very costly adventure for the district, although I'm sure Bill doesn't mind creating a new building. Anyhow, lots to discuss on that. One other thing, and I guess we'll get to this later, but I had not heard any substantive comments or concern about public safety here. We've got outsiders have been identified as the culprits, but we don't know which outsiders. Alcohol is involved in some of the culprits, but we don't actually have any strategies in place, and quite frankly, it's actually appalling. I have a couple daughters. I know a couple of you have a couple daughters. I certainly wouldn't have wanted them to have the experience that poor girl had in April. Fortunately, it wasn't more serious, but it was plenty serious. It was a major felony that occurred here, and you're investing in a police officer to intimidate me into being quiet. I'm not going to be quiet about stuff like this, okay? And I really ask you to invest our resources wisely in security apparatus for the park.
Thank you, Stephen. Just so I can rebut your claim to us being secret, all the documentation has been on our website for how many months now?
Quite a few.
I mean, at least half a year.
There's
All
actually
the
a
documentation.
link. There's a link. Are you talking about the shed?
Yeah.
And there is a link to the county planning page
Okay.
on our website where all of the plans have been uploaded, so on and so forth.
So, just for the record, there's a link on our website to the county's page that has been established solely for the purpose of public information. And the second point you made about the plan to mitigate likelihood of incidences like we had here from happening again, this is actually a work in progress and has been discussed at the Park and Rec Commission meeting, and we will be talking about it, or you can see it in the draft minutes of Park and Rec Commission meeting. So that's also an invalid point. So, moving on to item
So wait a second,
F1.
you're not really actually supposed to rebut my points. I would like to rebut what you just said, because you've actually, you've distorted the truth there, Isabella. Isabella, you've distorted the truth. I would like an opportunity to speak. May I have an opportunity to speak to your points?
And so we will.
Are you going to just simply ignore the fact that a girl was raped here and that this district kept it hidden, secret, and all of you knew about this? You kept it secret from the public. You also canceled out. You also stopped renting the facility. So our revenue has suffered. Is there going to be someone who is let go because our revenue is down?
How much longer will the meeting be going on, do you know? How many more items are there?
I think the rest of this meeting wraps up pretty quick.
Eight more items, but that will be much more efficient. Eric? Thank you, sir.
I will not submit to rude behavior. I will not submit to bullying. I will not submit to you compromising my free speech. And I'm not going to step out. If you would like to.
No, just listen to me. Just a second, please.
Sorry, you're on YouTube. Yeah,
This was just, I don't want to talk to you because I think you have something let's just get through the meeting.
Look, I understand it, but they do not conduct meetings according to law and convention, actually, in all other meetings. Well, unfortunately, I have to bring it up to the DA or I have to sue them. And I'm not, in the meantime, I'm not gonna step outside and record these events because that's exactly what they're doing. They're playing schoolyard bullies, being mean, so I don't want to be here. I actually don't want to be here, but I unfortunately, I have no choice because if I want to participate in my local government, as I have a right, and I know you understand that, I'm going to stay here, and I'm not going to back down. So, last meeting, Isabella slandered me twice by calling me a liar in public. Now that's an act. I could sue her for that, okay? I don't want to. What I do want is I want us to have civility, and I've asked for that every single time. And so yeah, my back, my hair on my back is up, and I'm upset, but I will not back down. So if you need to escalate.
No one's going to ask.
Okay.
I want to ask you, let's get through this.
Enough is enough.
Talk about what you can do in the future.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Appreciate it. If we could just wrap things up for tonight, I think, as soon as possible.
We have 2 approvals that we have to pay attention to.
Okay, sure.
So since we're all back in the room, we'll resume the meeting, and we are still on item F1, which is the agreement between the County of Marin and the Marinwood Community Services District for fire protection and emergency services to County Service Area 13. The following item would be to the juvenile hall side. Both of these items are an annual action item for the board. Eric, do you want to add anything?
I think you pretty well covered it. I will say, again, these are annual renewals. They are based on very set formulas that have been used for many years, and I will say that both agreements were approved by the County Board of Supervisors in their meeting this morning. I will also say I do have one small typo, but it is not substantive, where there's the date says 2019 on 2 areas where it should say 2020. And I've already talked to the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer, and he wasn't too worried about that either. It's just about when payments come due. It's pretty obvious what it should be.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Questions from the board?
I have no questions, sir.
Public comment? On item F1, hearing none, may I hear a motion?
Motion to approve the agreement between the County of Marin and Marinwood Community Services District Fire Protection and Emergency Services to County Service Area 13.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item F2 is the same kind of agreement for the juvenile hall site. No issues from the board, public comment? Hearing none. Motion please.
So moved.
Bill Shea makes the motion, second.
Second?
Thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item F3 are the draft minutes of Fire Commission meeting of October 1st. It's a review item. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I'm just glad that the request for badges was just a joke.
I felt I needed it.
Yes. Public comment on draft minutes of Fire Commission meetings.
Yes.
October 1st. Go ahead, Stephen.
This is, I'm sorry. Yes, the comment is there's not enough information here. The fire district spends basically half our funds here, and we have absolutely no record of it. I requested at least notes from Eric, and he said he didn't have to do it by law. And once again, I think you're kind of missing the point of a public agency. The public agency is responsible, not just to me, but to the community at large. And you're operating the fire commission as if it was a secret boys club. We love our firefighters. We want the best of them. We are in Marinwood probably, I'm guessing we're one of the most heavily burdened districts for what we pay per household for fire services in Marin County. And we really do need to know more about what's going on in the fire department. So I'm urging you to adopt a policy so you don't have to rely on vague notes, and we can really understand what's going on with our district. And it might be a good thing because we've got good people, so. That's it.
Okay, and the item F5, the date of next fire commission meeting is November 5th, to which... Oh, so sorry. Thank you. F4 is the chief officer report and activity summary. I apologize, Chief.
Thank you very much, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen. Just a couple of items to add to the written report. We did have a well-attended and nice celebration of life for retired Fire Chief Jay Newhouse, who passed away from cancer. Anyway, very, very nice ceremony. Good to see a lot of people. He had a significant impact on creating the volunteer program, which obviously produced hundreds of firefighters over the years. So, and that's a program we continue today. So we're proud of that. We're nice to support his family. I wanted to mention that there's a Red Cross program called Sound the Alarm, and the Red Cross volunteers actually install new 10-year life smoke detectors in homes free of charge, and it's available to the Marinwood community. So we're going to publicize that effort and then get involved with some volunteers to assist the Red Cross to do that locally, as well as having these detectors available from Engine 58. I wanted to mention that. And finally, you see them wearing pink patches all month long, and then from October 21st through the 26th, all Marin County firefighters will be wearing pink as well. So commonly seeing the pink t-shirts, but so between those 2 dates that week, everyone in support of breast cancer awareness. So thank you very much, and again, thank you for your support with the Marinwood Wildfire, Marin County Wildfire JPA. Thank you.
Quick question.
Yes.
Are these just smoke detectors or also CO2?
These are only smoke detectors. They're not combination devices.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add one thing to his report, if you don't mind?
Sure.
Even though I'm in no way, shape, or form the chief officer. He mentioned the Firehouse, the Public Safety Foundation Board. I think that I believe mentioned this in a previous meeting. A group of firefighters, Steve Korea, and I know Ryan Brackett, I believe, and Otis Smith, had applied for a grant. They did get awarded. It was valued at approximately the number in there, $17,795. They actually were able to use those funds and have purchased 3 new and state-of-the-art thermal imaging cameras, which are very useful for them to have. Point of my bringing this up also is that the local firehouse subs in Nevada will be doing an award recognition on October 23rd. I will send you all information for it. It'll happen in the middle of the day. The 23rd is a Wednesday. I will be attending, obviously, on behalf of the district.
I'll be there too.
And I believe we'll be bringing the engine down for that and everything, and it's just a little PR more for firehouse subs to say, this is what we do with our foundation and help our local firefighters. So October 23rd at 1:30 p.m. I will send you all information about it. If you should be available, you are obviously welcome to attend.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chief, silly thing, can we just
Yes.
not,
Please.
I can't really read it, so you
Right.
can either leave it out or just like the
Right.
easy, simple
Yes.
one. Thank you.
Yes.
That's much better.
Thank you.
The color version is much easier.
Yeah.
Public comment on chief officer report, hearing none. Item F5, date of next fire commission meeting is November 5th. Moving on to item B1, draft minutes of Park and Recreation Commission meeting of September 24th. Any questions from the board? We're just reviewing. Nothing.
Are there expiring terms from the
Yes.
commissioners?
Yes, plenty.
Wait a
Okay.
minute.
Well, there's 4 commissioners, 2 of them will be expiring, plus there's another seat that has never been filled. 2 of them won't be expiring, so if the 2, if at least one of the 2 doesn't decide, if one of the 2 decides to reapply, then we will still have quorum. If they don't, and other members of the public don't, then we won't have a quorum for the P&I commission until such time as we can find a 3rd member.
So therefore, there'll be, no reason to meet?
So you want to sit there and talk?
Well,
They-
We can still
I'm
meet.
sure that's always fun.
Well, we can meet, and we'll see what happens with the commissioners. And,
Okay, so at this point, you have no, they still have time to.
Yes, November
declare
1st.
November 1st.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then it'll be on the November board meeting.
Okay.
We should be bare bone, but we should be okay, I think.
Time will tell.
Public involvement.
Public comment on draft minutes of Park and Recreation Commission meeting minutes. Item G1, draft minutes of Park and Recreation Commission meeting minutes of September 24th.
I have a comment on that.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so, yeah, I did watch the meeting and it was quite interesting to me. I mean, and Isabella, you were there, so you know what actually occurred. There was an hour discussion on rental policy, which was quite interesting, but it is completely missing from these minutes. And, you know, what is the point? Do you not want the public to know what you're thinking? I mean, really, this is actually, I mean, if someone drowned in the pool, would you close the pool for 6 months while you dreamed up policy? I just think that, you know, you're way off base, and you've got to bring these issues, these policy issues, before the community. Why are you hiding this? It really doesn't make sense to me unless you're trying to avoid embarrassment and some other things. I know everyone here is horrified by the attempted rape, as I am, and I don't want to minimize that. But the point is is that there are things that we can do to improve security, to minimize the effects of these things, and they have not been vetted in a public forum. And you're not even making it public by the minutes that you're using.
Thank you for your opinion. Item G2 is the recreation and park maintenance activity reports. Are there any questions from the board?
We got stuff coming up this month, huh?
Well, yeah, I'll say Friday's a big day, last day of the pool season, and it's our big Halloween harvest festival, so staff's working hard on both keeping the pool staffed the rest of this week and preparing for that event, so looking forward to that. And as well as our other events coming up this fall and winter. We're also, just one other note that I was pointing out, accepting applications for our vacant maintenance 2 worker 2 position. Received some applications, some resumes, and we're hoping to be conducting interviews by the end of the month. So, for Victor's position.
Right. Thank you. Any questions from the public? Stephen?
Yeah, well, first thing I would like to do, the pool's beautiful. I know Jeff can attest to it because he swims there as often as I do. And I want to thank Luke and his staff. And Stephanie, who doesn't talk a lot, but obviously she gets things done, pool manager. And also I want to say that I received a report that the water fountains are now clear, and so things have improved. We had the car show recently, and I'm guessing that we didn't charge for the car show, but we maybe should have, because we had some damage to our facilities. At the very least, they should have an insurance requirement. So basically, we're subsidizing. The other thing is that we had a porta potty that had a sign on it, men only, it's really gross inside, or something to that effect, which is awful. You know, we have women in the park. That should have been taken care of. In fact, the Lions Club should have been required with the facility there to have porta potties on staff. And also, I didn't make it during the event. If they were serving beer, there should be some sort of security present to make sure things don't get out of hand. You know, I brought up drinking in the park before, and I just want to point out that both local community members and what you term outsiders drink in our park, and there's absolutely nothing being done about that. I'm not a teetotaler, but I do think that when the guys have 3 keg parties and are peeing in the bushes, that's totally out of line, and I do think that it's gotten gradually more of a party spot. So that needs to be reined in. We need to be a little kinder to the neighbors. People have to walk by there. I would rather not guys drink in front of the children who walk down through that area and ride bikes and what have you. But you know, we do have a rule: no alcoholic beverages in the park, and you're not enforcing that rule. And I think that you should, for the quality of life, the quality of this park. We love the park, you know, we love our community, and let's stay ahead of these things and not let them become problems that are much more difficult to address in the future.
Thank you, Stephen. Next Park and Rec Commission meeting takes place on October 22nd, and so we move to item H, which are the board member items of interest and requests for future agenda items.
Nothing for me.
I have 2 items. I'd like to thank the fire department for obtaining the equipment grant. That was tremendous and super helpful, and kudos. As well as make an announcement that Leah Green stepped down from her presidency for personal reasons, and as a vice president, I will try to fill her shoes for the remainder of the year until next president is elected in December. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So hang on for a second. I have an opportunity to speak. First of all, are you preventing me from speaking?
It's
Well, I understand you wrote that, but I do believe I have, under the law, an opportunity to speak on every item presented. It won't take too long. You know, the most generous and kind, and I do mean the most generous benefactor of this district is not here tonight, and she suffered an accident. She'll be recovering. She is in recovery right now. And I think it would be great for the board to muster up the goodwill to send her a note, goodwill, get well note, and that of course is Linda Barnello. And the other thing is, in our future agenda, we actually need to talk about the maintenance shed, which we have not really had a public dialogue on this. You guys have, you know, presented your clipped responses, but you've actually not engaged dialogue. We presented a petition of 200 people, and they were asking for a public meeting. You actually said that you were going to do this, and it's never been done. And I think you are pulling the wool over our eyes, and it's not going to work. It's not going to work. You're going to own this. You're going to own this.
Date of the next regular board meeting is November 12th, 2019, to which everybody is, as always, welcome and invited. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you so much.